Hey everyone, I'm Mike Settele. Welcome to our first SAT class of 8. I am going to be your teacher for this class, for all of the classes to come. And trust me, you are in good hands. I have been an SAT tutor since 2006. I have done it all. I've taught SAT classes online, in person. I've done private tutoring. I've taken the SAT more times than I care to remember. I most recently took the June SAT, so I've got lots of experience with the actual test. And many of you might even have seen some of my YouTube videos. I've got a pretty big channel all dedicated to SAT stuff. So you are in very good hands. We're going to talk about different things in each class. I've got a whole lesson plan for us. But basically, it's going to be supplemented by what you guys are doing on your own in the SAT portal. And I'll show you that in a second. But let's make sure everyone is logged in. And then we can get started on some questions that I've written for you guys and hit some major strategies to start off our prep. Hello, everyone. We're a little early. Hello, Liam. Nice to finally meet you.
You too. Nice to meet you.
If you guys can see my screen, we still got a couple minutes, but if you click the My Screen tab at the top, I want you guys to get into this page. This is the portal that you got a separate login for. And when you get there, there's this button, Television for Class. That is what we're going to be using. So you can go ahead and click that. It shouldn't show anything quite yet, but I'm going to put on a very hard question. And that we can occupy ourselves with for a couple minutes. Don't panic. They're not all going to be this crazy, but if you've got some ideas, feel free to try them. And so eventually you should get to something that looks like this. This is the question. And if you want the scratch paper, you've got it. Basically, what we're going to do is use that so that you guys can interact with these questions as we go. This is, like I said, a very hard one. So no pressure to get this right away. We'll do some easier ones too. If you guys don't want to put on your screens, that's fine. If you do, that's fine. Whatever you're more comfortable with. If you have a question or something, put it in the chat because that's going to be on top of my screen. And feel free to ask questions. I've got a lot planned for us, but don't hesitate if something isn't clicking. This crazy question, work on a little bit, but we're going to come back to it. If you have an answer, you can click and you can enter it here. This is a little different from how the main student-produced response works in the Blue Book app on the actual SAT, but that's just a programming thing. And these scratch papers you can feel free to use as well, or just having a paper is fine. So where do we get the questions from? This particular question I wrote. So it's based on other SAT questions that I've seen over the many, many years of doing this. I'll give it another sec. You guys, again, can work on this if you have any ideas. If you have no ideas, that's okay. Like I said, crazy hard question. The homepage of this portal, this Television for Class, that's what we're going to be doing during these Zoom sessions. This is where I'm going to let you guys interact with the questions. So it's a very similar format to the actual SAT. You'll see I've put some homework things here that you can follow. This is just meant to supplement the other portal. The best way to get in touch with me and the most immediate is through this. Go through the tabs here really quick, and then we'll swap out the question and start talking about some strategies. The main buttons at the top are pretty much everything you'll need. Like I said, this is a Television for Class. That's getting you to the page here where you have the access to the question. And if you click the scores button, you will have the ability to enter scores that you get. So two kinds of scores: Blue Book practice test scores. These have, there's pretty clear instructions about how to enter those. And then official scores, which are much easier to enter. So you can just choose, okay, I took the May SAT. That was on May 3rd or something. I got a 610 and a 590. And then those knowledge and skills things, 6, 7, 5, 5, 5, 7, 6, 6. And submit. And there you go. Any past scores are there. And this is helpful for me. So maybe make it a point to do this sometime this week. I'll remind you guys in the homework as well to do that. But it'd be cool for me to see your scores. And then you can have the full score report for any past scores, just so I have a sense of where you guys are starting from. And once you have practice tests as well, like I said, those will go in and we get much more detailed results about those. Those are really, really useful for just keeping track of your progress. But don't feel compelled to do a practice test if you haven't done one in Blue Book. We don't need one right away. We'll learn some things first before we get into that. That'll happen during our third class. We'll talk more about that. If you have questions about that page, let me know, but that should be pretty straightforward. And the main page is going to be this practice one. This is where a lot of good stuff happens. And there's going to be basically all these different exercises and things like that. So these tabs right here coincide with our classes. There you can see there's 10 steps in this study plan. There are also 8 classes, so we are going to double up when we get to some of the practice tests. But this is probably the easiest way to organize your practice. And we are going to do some work today on the strategies for the main parts of the sections. You can see here there's a lot of good exercises that you can work on. There's some easy quizzes at the beginning. There's some specific strategy exercises, and each one of those is going to let you answer questions the same way we're going to do tonight. So basically, the strategies part is what we start off with, because that's the most important piece of the SAT. We've got to be able to change the strategies we use to change the scores that we want to get. So this is basically what you, almost like a checklist that you want to make sure you accomplish each week. You can work on each week's lessons a little bit before our class. You can do a little bit after. I'm not expecting you to have completed everything beforehand, but basically every week you want to be working through one of these. And again, I'll post that in the portal, kind of somewhere here, and then also in the other portal as well, so that it's in multiple places. So it's just a really great way to stay organized. And we are going to talk about things like dumb summaries today. And so when you make an exercise, you'll see most of them have a video at the beginning that you can watch. I highly recommend watching the video before you start the lesson, because I go into specifics, especially for the strategies, where I want you to change the way you're thinking about things. So it's really important that you're answering these 10 questions using the stuff that I talk about in the video. So really, really great. And then for each of these questions, when you get to it, not to spoil it, but this is not such a bad one, if you get it right or wrong, a little video appears going over it. And so that's really, really important, is that you also learn from mistakes right away. Don't just look at it and be like, okay, I get it. The correct answer is whatever. You want to make sure that you're learning what you could do differently to get it right. And there's a little analysis here about what might be going wrong in your answering, right? So any questions so far? You can feel free to chat them or unmute if it's easier. That's fine. I do want to show you one other thing. Okay, so if I go back to this, you'll see at the bottom of this particular checklist, there's this bookmarks quiz. I highly recommend everyone do this. Okay, as you can see, watch the video, important instruction. And that's because the bookmarks are part of the way we want to think about this test, right? So if you're trying to prepare for the SAT, obviously you're going to do some practice questions. You're going to get some of them wrong, but you're also going to get some of them right by accident. And that's an opportunity to learn something new. So I'm a real stickler for this. We want to basically use this button right here, this mark for review button, to indicate when we're not sure of an answer. And that video at the beginning will explain this in much more detail, but we are going to use this tonight. I'll talk about it as we go through some questions. Basically, we want to make sure that if we get something right by accident, we still review it with some video like I've got for most questions, or you ask me if you're confused, you can chat me about a question. But that's a great way to basically double the amount of practice you're getting. It's not just about right and wrong. If we're only thinking about things being right and wrong, we are missing another dimension to the SAT, is how sure were we? Did we do it efficiently? Did we use a strategy that's going to make us better in all sorts of places? So this bookmark thing, really, really important for improving our scores. We want to make sure we're taking advantage of all those opportunities to learn. So you will hear me be a pain in the neck about that. And that brings us back to this question, where most of you, even if you get an answer, are probably hitting this mark for review button. And you can do that even on the questions that we work on this portal here. And I have all your answers here, so I know when you guys are struggling, getting something right, getting something wrong, so I can keep track of everyone. But this would be a good example where if by now you don't really have any clue what's going on, you can bookmark it. So that way, even if you happen to guess randomly correct here, you can make sure you go back. But I want to make sure you guys also know that it's not going to be this hard every single question. We are going to cover a wide variety. So let's back up a little bit. I know some of you might still be working on this one, but let's do a little something different. Let's back up and do a slightly easier question. Take a look at this one. There are a couple ways to do it. And we are starting with math because I think that's where we have both the best advantage because you've probably all learned all the math you need for the SAT from school. If you've taken Algebra 2, you're good. You know everything. But we also learn things in school maybe in ways that are different from the way that we want to solve things on the SAT. So feel free to give this one a shot, and then I'll talk about my method here. But as soon as I see this question, I know exactly how I'm going to solve it. Even before I really read it, I've got a plan. So give it a try, and you can interact with this. If you want to cross out answer choices, you can do that like this. You can choose it. You can mark it for review, all that good stuff. All right, cool. I'm seeing some answers here. I'm seeing some crossouts. That's good. That's good. And I promise you, you don't really need to know anything about parabolas to get this right. I know that that word is important in the question, but you don't really need to know anything about it. Give it another couple seconds, and then I'll start talking more about my solution here. Perfect. That works so well. And if anyone knows what PPIE stands for, feel free to let me know. I'm curious if anyone's done anything about their math strategies yet, for either from my portal or from YouTube or anything like that. There it is. Yes, Liam, plug points into equations. So I'll write that out. Because what we're talking about tonight is not individual things that are going to help on one or two questions. We are talking about strategies that are near universal, that are going to make a difference on all sorts of questions, a wide variety of questions, things that we can almost use as a mantra as we go through the SAT. And literally, every time I see any math question on the SAT, I'm asking myself the same thing. Do I have points? Do I have equations? Because my main math strategy is to plug points into equations. And I don't care if you're in AP calculus or whatever, and you know everything you need to know, you're the top of your math class. There are going to be times when if you do things the traditional way that your teachers show you in school, you're just going to be inefficient or you're just going to waste brain power. One good thing about plug points into equations is it's very mindless. And I see just here right off the bat, if I look at this question without even reading it, I see two things. I've got points, I've got equations. So my brain just quickly goes to that. And I'm curious how many of you just naturally did that, because that is absolutely the way I would handle this, because I want to do something that's pretty mindless. And especially since one of the points is 139, well, that's a pretty nice set of numbers to work with. At least the one is. Because if I start plugging that in, I don't even really need a calculator to help me, right? So I can ignore the y really, but 1/2 of 1 minus 5 times 1 minus 12. Now, I wouldn't write this on my scratch paper if I was doing an SAT, because that I can probably do in my head, but I would write maybe this, 1/2 of -4 times -11, right? I would do the little bit of math, and okay, 1/2 of -4 is -2. -2 times -11 is 22. But I need it to be 39, so I know that that point does not work in that equation. So boom, that choice is gone. And then I'm just going to go down the line. And again, if you have questions, if I'm going too fast, if anything is unsure, just feel free to give me a chat. I can see it all going down in the chat. So that helps me out. So 1/2 of 1 plus 5 is 6. 1 plus 12 is 13. Well, 3 times 13, right? Because 1/2 of 6 is 3, is 39. So that looks pretty good. But I can't stop there. I got to go all the way through, because you never know. Sometimes multiple choices might work, but this is okay. -3 times 3 times -11. Well, that's what, 99? Am I doing that right? Certainly not right there, though. So that gets rid of another choice. Get rid of that. And then finally, D, -3. 1 minus 2 is -1. And 1 plus 12 is 13. So this doesn't surprise me. Again, we have 3 times 13 is 39. So two choices work. That's very common with this strategy. Sometimes we get lucky, and sometimes we plug a point in, we're just done. Only one answer will work, and that's that. But in this case, we got to do something else, but that's okay, because, well, they give us a second point, right? So let's just do that. Let's do the other point here. Let's squeeze it in. -5, 147. Here's where I might start to go towards my calculator, but at the same time, have some confidence, because -5 plus 5 is 0. So this whole thing is a 0, which means everything is 0. So that doesn't seem right. And then, oh no, My pen doesn't work all the way down. D. Let's just double check, make sure, can't hurt. -3 times -5 minus 2 is -7. -5 plus 12 is +7. And finally, I'm going to reach for the calculator because -49 times 3, -3 I can't do in my head, but luckily my calculator can do it for me, and it's 147, confirming that choice D is the answer. So let's see. It should pop up for you guys that you either got it right or wrong. So hopefully, yeah, like I see the question, Amin, good question. I'll get that in a second. But hopefully you can get in the habit of spotting points and equations really, really quickly. Before I get to the other solution, that you're suggesting, the thing that the College Board would probably tell us to do here is use the fact that this is a vertex to our advantage. A vertex, remember, is if we have a parabola, it's the point at the bottom. And one thing that's always true about a vertex is it's halfway between the x-intercepts. The way that these equations are formatted in the choices, they're giving us the x-intercepts. So the College Board explanation might be very conceptual. They want us to look and say, okay, what's the average of the two x-intercepts in these choices? It's supposed to be -5. And we can see in choice D that happens. -2 plus 12 is -10. Divide that by 2, you get -5. So it works out. And maybe we'd have to check out the other point as well. But to me, that's a lot of very, very specific knowledge that we need in order to solve this question, when instead, plug points into equations doesn't really require any knowledge to solve it. It's just plug them in, let the numbers or the calculator do the work for you. Now, speaking of that, Amin's question is, could you solve this with Desmos, with the table of values? Yes, you can. There's going to be some complicated things we can do with Desmos using a regression, but the problem, I'll even just show you quick. Let me just make sure, can we see the Desmos? Good. There are ways, we're not really going to get too into this today, but there are ways to take points, and there's a lesson on this in my website, so it's there. This is called a regression, and you can use an equation, in this case a quadratic, to make the equation, right? Based on the points. Basically, it's going to plot those points for you and just tell you automatically what the equation is. The problem is these default things here give us a very specific type of quadratic equation, right? It's the standard form. And these numbers do not look like the numbers we were given in this. So in order to do that regression, we'd have to completely change the equation. You can learn how to do that, but I think that that's messy. Another way we could have used the calculator here is just to try every answer choice by typing it out and seeing which one gives us the right stuff. So if I did choice A, for example, 1/2 x minus 5 times x minus 12, I see my vertex is not what they say it is, right? Vertexes are clickable points. So if I did the right answer, -3 times x minus 2 times x plus 12, I don't know why it's red as well, but that's this one. Here it is. Look at how much I got to scroll to get that vertex, because it's, oh, and the colors are different. Oh, see here, I'll change it for you. Purple. There it is. We can see it does have the right vertex. So we could do that. We could graph it and verify, but my thing with Desmos and the SAT is a lot of times it ends up just being a lot of time wasted typing things when a little bit of mental math is easier. So, you'll get better at using the calculator in the right moments, using your mental math in the other right moments, and using strategies versus using traditional math. That's stuff that comes with practice. But I want to stress for now is try to break old habits. Try to get away from the more traditional math that you learn in school. Try not to think about this question as about parabolas. Open up the possibility that this kind of simple strategy would work. And if you're not sure if a strategy like this is going to work, well, just try it anyway and let it fail. Because through those failures, you'll also learn, okay, this is a time I can use the strategy. This is a situation I can't. So at the beginning stage of SAT prep, you want to focus on getting a lot of questions right. That's everyone's goal, is I want to improve my score. I want to get more questions right. But my advice is don't worry about that for now. Don't focus on speed. Don't focus on accuracy. focus on taking chances on new habits, new ways of doing things, because once you get used to those new habits, you're going to have a much better time improving your score because you'll be answering questions in different ways. You'll be avoiding traps and things like that. And to bring it back, you'll have a much better chance at the crazy stuff like this. Because again, this looks crazy. How many of you even have submitted an answer? One. So let's see if we can do it. I'll help you with this one, but notice if you want, you can see we have, thinking about our plug points into equations again, we have what we want. Do we have points? Do we have equations? We definitely have equations, right? There's a big one right there in the top. So I see that right away. My brain's already going there. Now, do I have points? The answer is yes. They gave us points in two ways that are a little bit more subtle than the last question. K is the y-intercept. Well, that's a point. A y-intercept, that's a specific point. Every graph or most graphs have a y-intercept. So that's a point. That's the point 0, k, right? Every y-intercept has an x coordinate of 0. That's really good because 0 is also a nice number. So that's helpful. Plus this other thing here, this is also a point. It looks insane, but it's function notation. Function notation gives us an x and a y. And yeah, the y is insane, but let's not worry about that. Let's trust the strategy. So 8/3 k minus 475 over 21. And someone did ask this before. Where's this question come from? All the questions we're going to do tonight, don't worry, I've written them all. I've been writing SAT questions for over a decade at least, writing them and teaching them twice as long. So I know what a question is going to do. But I don't want to spoil the questions that are both on my website and on the Blue Book practice test in the College Board resources. So don't worry, that's not going to happen. Everything we do is going to be new. But you'll see as you take more SAT practice questions, there's not a whole lot of new in the SAT. They tend to repeat themselves. So what I would do here is I just follow my instruction, plug points into equations. And another thing we'll learn as we start to adopt these strategies is laziness is really, really good. And I see of the 2 points that I've got, there's obviously one that's lazier, this one. So I'm going to start with that. Let's plug that in, right? So the k is the y, and that's going to go in place of the f of x. Then negative 5/7, k is, we don't know, but x is 0, and plus b. So it seems like there's a lot going on, but lucky for us, k to the 0 is equal to 1. And we need to remember that. We're going to see zeros and ones in lots of places on lots of math questions. We're going to use those numbers a lot. So we have to be comfortable with the properties of 0 and 1. And so anything, whether it's a letter or a number, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. Meaning that this is just k equals negative 5/7 plus b. Because 1 times negative 5/7 is negative 5/7. So I don't know what to do with that yet, but it's a little nicer than what we started with. It's a little simpler. So, okay, where do I go from there? I leave it aside and I try the other point and I see what happens. And let's change color for that so I don't get confused. So we're going to plug this point into this equation. So y goes in y, so that's going to be, oh boy, am I going to run out of space? 8/3 k minus 475 over 21 is equal to, that's my y coordinate, negative 5/7 k squared, right? Because 2 goes in for x, plus b. We're getting better. It might not feel like it, but we're getting better because now, if you know algebra, you know that in order to solve for k, which is what they want, we need to just have k's, because then we can solve whatever that equation is. It's a messy equation, but the problem right now isn't the k or the mess, it's the b. But I have a way of finding b, or at least making it go away. Because I have this equation here. If I get b alone, and this is probably, honestly, the hardest part of this, because this is the first time I have to think about something. Everything I did before that was just very robotic. I have points, I'm going to plug them into the equation. But now I get that k plus 5/7 is equal to b, and I can do a little substitution. So again, feel free to ask questions. I know this looks insane, but If I were doing this on the SAT, I'm thinking very, very little. I am just being a robot. I was told to plug points into equations. I did it. Now I've got a b that I want to get rid of. I'm plugging something in. So that's plus k plus 5/7. Now we've got what we want. An equation, which is one letter. There's a lot of k's, but there's just one type of letter. And we could solve this. We could move things around. We could combine like terms. It's a quadratic, so we're going to need to get it equal to 0, and then we'd have to factor. But here's where I wanted to show you another strategy that I think many of you will embrace quite quickly. Desmos does algebra for us. So let's move it over. So it's out of the way. And I'm going to type this in, right? So here, I'll type it in just as I wrote it, 8/3 k minus 475 over 21. Can I make this bigger? Yes, good. Equals negative 5/7 k squared plus k plus 5/7. And as I'm typing in Desmos, every time I type in Desmos, I'm always looking in two places because so many people lose points just typing in Desmos incorrectly. So you got to make sure, does it look good? 8/3 k minus 475 over 21 equals negative 5/7 k squared plus k plus 5/7. Looks good. But you can see we've got an error. Well, it doesn't like k because we're trying to graph something, right? It's Desmos. It's an xy plane. It doesn't know what to do with k, but it does know what to do with x's and y's. So all you got to do is swap all these k's for x's, and boom. What do we get? We get vertical lines, because what it's doing is it is solving that equation for you. All the algebra that your teacher would have made you do to solve this nightmare of a situation, Desmos just does it. And it graphs the answers, the values of x, as vertical lines. And lucky for us, we can tap the points where those lines touch the x-axis, so it's easy to see what the values are. Sometimes that won't happen, depending on what kind of equation you're giving it. That's fine. You can always just zoom in and see for yourself. But we've got two answers. Pick one. Put it in. Put it into the thing. I know most of you should be bookmarking because I can tell most of you didn't really know, but I'm curious. Of the two, how are we going to put it in? And some of you might still get it wrong, even though I'm telling you the answer is on the screen right now. But that's okay. I want to make a point about that. So give it a shot. Just the answer is right there on the screen. We want the value of k. These are giving us the values of k. All we did was switch it to an x, but otherwise these are still k's. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, is this going to work? Did it grade them? Yes. So some of you still got it wrong. So the answers here are listed 4.666, 4.667, 4.6667. And the reason is that all of those are equivalent to 14/3. So what gives? Why isn't -7 going to work? Well, let's go back to the question here. Ooh, I can do that. Yeah. Let's go back to the question. What does it say? The function f is defined above, where k and b are positive constants. So sometimes we do a lot of work on the SAT and they throw a little choice or a little word at us that makes all the difference. So yes, according to Desmos and all the math, -7 would be a valid value of k, but it's not positive. So it has to be positive. So if you got it wrong for that reason, no worries. That was the point, is I wanted to let you know that the SAT is doing that kind of mean thing so that when you get those answers at the end, you feel like you've accomplished something, but there was one little piece at the beginning that you got to make sure you check. So in the same way that as I was entering in Desmos, I kept going back and double checking that I was entering everything right. Whenever I have an answer to a question, I always go back to the question itself and make sure I haven't given them something different from what they want. Do they want a positive constant? Does it need to be an integer? Are they asking for k? Are they asking for b? Are they asking for x or y? Basically, just be really careful. Radiuses and diameters. There's lots of places where they're expecting us to get confused and miss something obvious. The other issue, though, is if you do 14 thirds as a decimal, it does come out to 14.6 repeating. And we can see that kind of in Desmos, right? We can see 4.6 repeating, and we can see that it rounds at a certain point. And this is just a reminder that this free response question thing on the SAT is very finicky about how it accepts answers. If you're entering a decimal, or especially a repeating decimal, or a decimal is just like lots of spots, and they don't tell you to round it to a specific value, you have to go with as many spaces as the thing will take. So normally that means 5 characters. And so in this particular case, 4 is 1 character. The decimal counts. 666 is 5 characters. But we can also, instead of just ending there, we can round the last one. If you stop short, you're going to be wrong. It's annoying. I think that's a mean thing that the SAT does. It seems like they should just always specify what to round to. But my advice is actually, if you've solved something and you've figured out the fraction value, you're better off entering it as a fraction just to play it safe, especially if it's thirds, sixths, sevenths, something weird. Oof. Now look, this is not a question that most of you need to be getting right away. But I wanted to make the point at the end of the day, this question is very similar to the parabola one. We have this ability to think in a very dumb way about something that's very complex, and at least it gets the ball rolling. I wouldn't know what I'm doing if I saw this on the test. I don't look at this and instantly have a plan of how I'm going to solve it. I don't know all the steps. Now I get 800s every time I take the SAT math. And it's just because I trust the process. I trust the strategies. I know that no matter what they're giving me, if it's points and equations, odds are very, very high that plugging those points into those equations is going to help. So my advice is, yeah, whether it's an easy question or a hard question, try to embrace that.